So pick one, anyone. Well, if you're trying to choose an egg donor, that's probably not the strategy to take. My name is Corlandos Scott, and I'm an assisted reproduction attorney out of Los Angeles, and I help people go through the egg donation process every single day. Let's talk about how to choose the right donor for you. In this video, we're going to talk about where to find egg donors and what to expect once you find them. We're going to cover what to consider when you're choosing your egg donor, and we're also going to talk about why the things you want to consider may not be as important as you think. Stick around to the end because I have something free for you. All right, let's get into it. So where do you find egg donors? Well, technically there is no right answer to that. I have seen people find donors on the internet, and I don't mean searching for companies, I mean like Craigslist or Facebook. Probably not the best strategy for optimal results, but people have done it. However, if I'm going to advise you on the best way to find a donor, it would be through using the services of companies called donor agencies. There's also things called egg donor banks, and clinics sometimes have databases of donors that you can choose from. So when looking for where the donors are, try to use a professional source, like a fertility clinic or a donor agency. Now, once you've found where you want to get your donor from, whether that is an egg bank or a donor agency, you have to look through their database. Most reputable agencies and egg banks have what we call databases of donors. And in these databases, you see exactly what the profile is of each of their donors. Now, don't expect to see the names of the donors because for the majority of donations, they're typically what we call anonymous donations, where you won't learn their legal identity and they won't learn your legal identity. So when you're looking through these databases, expect to see some type of alias. It may be a fake name or some type of code that they're given, like ABC123. But just know that each of these codes represents an actual human who is signed up to be a donor for this clinic or this agency. Now, when you're working through the databases, these are the things you should be able to see. You should be able to see some photos of the donor. Lots of agencies request that donors provide current photos as well as baby photos. They should also have something about the donor's medical background. You should see something about their education and also their interests. Essentially, what these profiles are supposed to do is give you an overall picture of who this person is. Now, let's talk about what to consider, because let's be honest, if you're looking for a donor, the question is, what do I need to look for? So let me ask you really quickly. I want to know, what right now do you think is the most important factor for you in finding a donor? Go ahead, comment below, let me know. I'd love to see what matters to you. Okay, let's talk about some universal things to consider, no matter what your specific personal preferences are. First of all, you want to know if the donor you're considering is a first-time donor or an experienced donor. Why does this matter? Well, it's often good to know if the donor is experienced because we can look at her track record. Oftentimes, we can look at the donor's previous donation cycles and see if they resulted in successful pregnancies, see if they resulted in live births, and maybe even get a number on the egg count that was retrieved in her last cycle or last couple cycles. Of course, this doesn't mean you shouldn't work with a first-time donor because there are other things that are involved in if that donor is right for you. So I wouldn't say don't take a chance with a first-time donor if that donor checks off all the other boxes in your list. You also want to consider the egg donor's medical history. And if you haven't seen it, make sure to check out my video on what are the requirements to become an egg donor, because we go into depth about some of those medical issues. But suffice it to say, you want to know if there are any medical issues with the donor, as well as any genetic issues that may pose a problem for whoever is going to be the provider of sperm for creating your embryos. Now we'll talk about not so much universal issues, but your personal preference. You want to think about physical appearance. Is that something that's important to you? Do you have a preference on how the donor appears? A lot of intended parents and recipients like to choose donors that resemble themselves for obvious reasons, but that's not always necessarily the case. Some things are more important to recipients than appearance, but you have to make that decision for yourself. So when you're going through the database, oftentimes you can ask agencies to present you with options that fit certain ethnic and appearance categories. Also, a personal preference is education. Now, when we say education, we're not talking about how intelligent the human being is, because intelligence is measured by all sorts of standards. But when we're looking at education, you can get a peek into the personality of the donor. You can look at what major she chose, or maybe what studies appeal to her, and get a feel for the type of person that she is. So make sure that if that's important to you, that you explore the donor's education. There's always that question of nature versus nurture. Well, let me just say this. It's not proven that if your donor was a Harvard graduate, that your child will also be an Ivy League shoo-in. So just make sure that you know, don't let education scare you away from choosing a donor, but if it's important to you, make sure you dig into it and understand exactly what your donor's education is. Like I said, I want to finish this video by talking about why it may not matter as much as you thought initially. Like I mentioned before, there's that whole nature versus nurture argument. And we can't promise that because your donor chose to go to law school, that your child would choose to go to law school. A lot of that deals with how you raise your child. And there's also another thing to consider. The donor is only one half of the equation. There's also going to be a sperm donor, whether that's you as the recipient or an outside donor, who's going to play a part in creating that embryo that becomes the fetus that ends up being your child. So we can't put everything on the donor's shoulder. So keep all of this in mind when you're choosing your donor. It's more than just a one-size-fits-all approach. Make sure you explore the things that matter to you and weigh them according to your own preferences. If you're considering how to choose an egg donor, you may also be wondering about how to choose a surrogate. If you are, I have something for you. It's called my 3 T's of successful surrogacy, and it's my framework for how to successfully go through the surrogacy process. In it, I talk about my 3 T's. That's team, that's terms, and that's tact. So click the link below and I'll give you a free training on how to dig into all 3 of those T's so that you can set yourself up for a successful surrogacy journey without losing sleep, time, or money. See you there.